Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the original 62 series of Goosebumps, and it's book number 14, The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. This is the first book we are doing in the Werewolf Review-a-thon, me, Michael Goosebumps fan, and Monster Blood, but Monster Blood's only doing the rating at the very end. So if you want to check out Michael Goosebumps' review of this as well, go to his channel. I'll have a link in the description of this video to go check him out. Go check out his video and hear his thoughts on this book. I really love this book. This book is very sentimental to me. It was my very first Goosebumps book ever. And it was also the very first book I learned to read on. I was about 4 or 5 years old reading Goosebumps. Don't say my parents are bad parents. I'm pretty sure I probably snuck a book from my cousin, or maybe I got it from a yard sale or something. I can't remember, but I remember having this book in my possession. I remember just staring at the cover for hours. I loved this cover so much. I just love how the colors pop. I like the greens and the purples. It's just so good. It's probably one of my favorite Jacobus covers. Probably in my top 10, but definitely not my favorite. But definitely in my top 10. But yeah, this story is such a classic story. I mean, it's a whodunit mystery type of horror story, which a lot of people still praise this book today, and it's one of the few original 62 books that still has held up surprisingly well for kind of how dated some parts of the book are, but it's still a really good story. I've reviewed the episode already in the past. I have a playlist for the Werewolf Review-a-thon. If you want to watch the episode review, I've done that a while ago. It will be in the playlist. And I gave that a 5 out of 5. This one I definitely think is going to be a 4.5 or higher. So basically the same caliber or same range. But as I'll get into their review at near the end, I think it does have one drawback for me. But for the most part, this was a solid book. If you have never read Goosebumps before, start here. If you like werewolves, if you like just creepy cabin in the woods story, this will do it for you. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. This story is super easy to spoil, so I will not get into too much depth. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a rundown and then cut it off at some point, because then I'll start to get into very, very deep spoiler territory. So all you need to know is that this kid named Grady and his family have moved from Vermont to Florida because his parents are studying migration habits for deer, specifically swamp deer that come from South America. And they want to transplant 6 deer into the Florida swamp area to see how well they acclimate to a new ecosystem and a new environment with new food. And they're going to track them and do a study on them. So in order to do that, they need to have an outpost in Florida. So they move to this little cul-de-sac type of neighborhood. In the South, they're very common. You'll have a little dead-end street with about 6 houses and a cul-de-sac, and that's the neighborhood. And that's where Grady has moved to. He's moved away from his friends. His sister, Emily, has moved away from her jerk boyfriend, according to Grady, in Vermont. And they have to move down to Florida. They have to leave their old life behind. They have to basically live out in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do except maybe go explore the swamp or maybe take a drive up to the nearest town, which you have to drive to. So Grady and Emily aren't happy when they move there. They're getting everything set up. They're getting the deer pen set up, and they notice the swamp is literally in their backyard. All you have to do is go through the flat part of their backyard, and then they're in the swamp line where the trees start. So Emily and Grady decide to go exploring to kind of see what the land looks like and maybe find something to do. And then so they go exploring the swamp, and they notice this really cool, I think they call it a bog. They find this bog that's really cool, and Emily kind of pranks Grady a little bit. And Grady, gets mad about it. And they keep exploring, and then they notice they're kind of lost. And they have no idea where they're at. They start to panic a little until they come across the shack. And when they go to the shack and try to knock on it to see if anybody was in there, this very creepy man answers the door and just stares at them. And Emily and Grady's first reaction is to run and try to make their way back home. And they notice that the hermit is chasing after them. Not really running after them, but like following them. So Grady and Emily get panicked and they have to find their way out. Eventually they do, and they make it back home safely. But Grady starts to fall ill. Grady doesn't know how to feel. He's like not feeling the best. And he gets up one day after being sick for a few days. He started feeling a little better, but you know, he's still not doing well. And he meets this kid named Will. And Will's this neighbor kid that lives about 2 doors down. And Will lets him know, like, you know, the swamp does have this fever nature to it. There's a girl named Cassie that lives nearby. You haven't met her yet, but there's other kids around. So Will feels a little better that he has some kids his own age. He feels a little bit better about living in the swamp. So Will goes back home, and Grady goes back inside to go to bed. He wasn't feeling good. And then later that night, he starts hearing howling coming from the swamp. And he's questioning if anybody else hears the howling. So he goes downstairs, and his sister Emily, sure enough, has heard the howling. And they open the back door. Well, Grady does. Emily doesn't want to because she's afraid. But Grady goes out there and looks. And the swamp is just humid. The deer look fine in their pen. Nothing really looks out of place or weird. It's just there was weird scratching noises and howling. And he gets very quiet when he goes outside. And then once the sound starts kicking back up and the wind starts blowing hard again, he goes back inside and locks the door. And they go to bed to try to, you know, maybe look at it tomorrow to see maybe if there was tracks or anything. And the next day, Grady wants to go check outside near the deer pen to make sure that there wasn't anything outside. And this stray dog comes out of nowhere. And this stray dog basically licks Grady to death. And Grady falls in love with this dog immediately, and he wants to keep it. And he doesn't know a name for it yet, but he basically went with the name Wolf, because Wolf is basically what he looks like. He looks like he's part wolf, part shepherd. He's just this massively big dog. And his parents don't know about keeping a dog, but Grady like basically says, you know, I have no friends here. There's nothing for me to do. Having a dog would be great for my morale. So the parents basically let him keep him. Grady keep Wolf. And his sister Emily doesn't like the dog to begin with, but what can she do? Will comes over to visit, and Will meets Grady and Wolf, and they want to go exploring a little bit in the swamp. And Grady shows Will the bog with Wolf, and then Wolf kind of disappears a little, and they try to find Wolf, and then they run into the swamp hermit again, and this time they hide from the swamp hermit, and they see blood on his shirt, and this creeps them out. So they feel like the swamp hermit could be the one out there killing animals, because while they're out in the swamp with Wolf, they find this bird basically ripped apart. Like, it's pretty graphic. The imagery in that, and they basically have no words to say from what they see. But they know that they basically have to get out of harm's way with this swamp hermit. They got to stay away from the hermit. Even though they're basically told by Grady's parents that the hermit's nothing to be feared. He's just a man that lives out in the woods. Now, when they get out of the woods this time, Will goes home. And then there's another incident at nighttime. There's a full moon out again. There's like this whole period of like 3 or 4 nights where there's a full moon. This is like night 3, I think. And this time, it goes a little far. Okay? So, Wolf starts making some ruckus downstairs. The parents have to let the dog out. Let him roam out because he's an outdoor dog. And during the night, there was howling and there was noises coming from outside. And when Grady goes out the next morning to find Wolf, he notices that one of the deer has been mutilated. Or there was a rabbit. There was a rabbit mutilated. And then the similar thing happened later on, and it ended up being one of the deer. Like, the cage got ripped open. And this was the last straw after numerous things going on with Wolf. That Grady's dad wants to take Wolf to the pound where they put dogs to sleep because the dog's a killer. He's an animal killer. He must have been the one that killed the bird in the swamp. He must have been the one that killed the rabbit. He must have been the one that killed the deer. Grady doesn't want this to happen. So they decide to sleep on it. And the next morning he goes and finds Wolf. And his dad pulls up with things to repair the deer cage. And his dad's like, okay, we're taking Wolf now. And Grady sets Wolf free, hoping that Wolf will stay away, you know, at this night of the full moon. So that way, when the whole full moon thing subsides, maybe he can convince his dad that Wolf isn't the one doing this. So he sets Wolf free. His dad's mad at him. It kind of fast forwards to the night, the final night of the full moon. And there's a big reveal that happens. There's a couple of things that happen in the story. I don't want to spoil it because I kind of skipped over a few things because it might hint at who it is. But all I'm going to say is Grady basically has to deal with a real-life werewolf. Who it is, I'm not going to say. And the ending kind of has a happy ending in a way for Grady and Wolf. And that's where I'll leave it. Because this is where I decided to cut it off there because I will start spoiling the book. But in a nutshell, that is The Werewolf Fever Swamp. There's a lot of pros with this book. The writing is absolutely fantastic in this book. Even though it does kind of get repetitive, and the action doesn't take place literally till like page 100, like the good action. But the suspense is there. Because it's one of those books that slow burn, and you have to really take it in to get it all in, but I love the writing. Grady's a very good character. Great supporting cast with Cassie and Will. They have really funny banter together. I didn't bring up Cassie in the plot overview, but Cassie is this girl that Grady originally heard about, but then he finally gets to meet Cassie, and Cassie kind of explains, hey, look, there's a werewolf, and that plays into the story, but I'm not going to spoil any of that. I'll leave it at that. So I liked Will and Cassie, supporting characters. Emily, you know, just a meh sibling character. The parents were pretty involved in this story, and I really got a sense of realism with the Grady and his parents' relationship. I really enjoyed that. There's a lot of red herrings to enjoy in the story. The pacing is pretty good. The outcome in the ending, however, now we're going to get into kind of negative territory here. I don't like how the book went and started cutting suspects. Basically up to the point where the big reveal happened, you already know who it is. I don't like that. I really did not like that aspect to the story. You basically had like 4 solid suspects, and by the time the reveal happened, it was down to 1. So you already know who it is. And the way it's described is kind of lackluster, because Grady apparently knew who it was already when he's being attacked by the werewolf and stuff. And that's just like, it's such a poor payoff to me. The ending, however, kind of, you know, makes it more lighthearted and kind of ties it all together. But it also leaves kind of a plot hole in a way. A plot hole as in, what are the werewolves' motives? Can the werewolves control hunger, or can the werewolves control killing impulses? I don't know. There's something about the ending, the whole ending of the climax to this book leaves a lot of hairs raised for me. It's scary, but it also opens up a lot of like Pandora's boxes, like what is Stein trying to say? So, or what is actually the rules here? I don't know. To me, I kind of view it as a negative because compared to the episode, I really got what the story was going for. In the book, I don't know what the story was trying to go for near the end. We can only go what was put in the book. So, yeah, basically that's Werewolf of Fever Swamp. If I had to rate this book from a 0 to 5 stars, I think I'm going to give this a 4.5 or higher. I think I'm going to give it, for its problems it had in the climax and the ending, I'm going to deduct 0.4 off and give it a 4.6 out of 5. Very solid book, excellent book. I highly recommend it if you've never read Goosebumps before. Start here. Excellent. This was my first Goosebumps book. Still love it till this day. So yeah, let me know in the comment section, guys, with Werewolf of Fever Swamp. Did you love it or did you hate it? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.